companies should think about what that looks like for their respective parent employees, right? So not just for moms, but for, parents in general, because at the end of the day, you want to keep your talent. So what kind of talent retention strategies should be utilized if your talent happens to be a parent, right?
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we examine the real life challenges of women who are climbing the corporate ladder, building their own businesses, and sometimes navigating that complex juggle of career and family. I'm Diane Mocha. I'm the founder of the MomSub Childcare app, and I'm here digging deep with our women guests so we can find out how work and life can fit together for them and for you. And today I'm here with Lynette Correa-Vélez. She's a career coach with a master's in education who has over 20 years of experience empowering leaders in the workforce, especially those in the tech industry from marginalized communities. Lynette, thank you so much for being here. I know we went back and forth a few times, but we made this happen because the working women of the world are something we both feel passionate about, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And as they say in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, wicked excited to be here and honored to chat with you.
Awesome. So I want to start out by really digging into this idea of being a woman in the workplace and how it may have differed for you in your career as you wanted to build more, move into leadership roles, move into entrepreneurship. What were some of the specific challenges you faced as a woman?
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll start off by saying that I'm a third generation, first female born matriarch on my mother's side of the family. So, definitely within my blood to, lead in various ways. And I kid you not, I started working at the age of 14, particularly as a first generation high school and college graduate. And as I got older, went to college, started in the workforce, particularly in career coaching and career development. There was some glass ceiling situations that happened, even from the very early years of my career that were both great and not so great, that taught me various lessons.
Mm. Can you give me an example of a time that you felt like, oh, that's where I should be or should be going, and I see there's no way I'm going to get there, either in this organization or and why? And did you walk away and find another place, or did you say, I'm going to find a way to power through and pave the way for the future women?
Yeah, I think probably if you look on my LinkedIn, every single position that I had post undergrad, that's basically how I felt that, I was able to attain the experience there. I was able to, of course, to have workplace mentors or workplace femtors. But those were few and far between and unfortunately not enough for me to stay long term at those respective organizations, aside from when I was part of national layoffs during the Great Recession when I was working for a national nonprofit at the time. And I decided to be the captain of my own ship and get into edtech social entrepreneurship. That was around 2007.
Wow. What a big leap and what a tough time. Yes, I went through tough times myself. I had a real estate industry that I was kind of new to the real estate business before the crash, and boy did I learn a lot after.
Lots of lessons
Yes.
as a first time tech entrepreneur and definitely made some mistakes during that time. I was in my mid 20s, had a team of about five, had the company for about 8 years. But when I realized that and you said it beautifully, the push uphill was going to be a lot harder. That's when I decided to disintegrate the company and go back to grad school.
I want to hear about that company. So you got laid off. You realized probably after you were applying and applying that this is not a good time to look for a job.
Right.
You decided to do this other thing. What was it called? What was the vision? How did you build up to become five strong on your team?
hmm
And what led to you having to feel like it was time to let it go?
Yeah, for sure. Because as you can imagine, that's a very hard lesson to have, particularly for your first company baby, right? they say that entrepreneurship or being a small business owner is like having another child, and I believe that to be true, being a current mom. So at that time, exactly actually how it happened. It was a very tough time during the Great Recession. I was in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, in the Northeast. And, a lot of positions were freezing, a lot of positions were being taken down, just positions weren't opening in general. And so pivoting to entrepreneurship, quite frankly, was key for me at that time. And I was able to grow the company and multiply my efforts by hiring up to 5 different staff members. And it was a mixture of, word of mouth referrals, connecting with folks that I knew and worked very well with and trusted at the time. Um, and then, by the time, 8 years went by very, very quickly, I realized that I definitely had to disintegrate the company. And kind of reskill, upskill, and next skill through grad school. And interestingly enough, also around that time, my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, he was accepted to his, graduate program at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And, he's always been my biggest cheerleader and biggest fan and highly encouraged me, even though I have my bachelor's degree and several certifications under my belt, to apply for my master's. And I found a really great master's program. It was an MED in e-learning for workplace learning and training with the focus in human resource development program at U of I. And I just thought this was perfect. It was 2015, excuse me, it was 2014. Started the program in 2015. We got married, got pregnant, and I graduated 10 months pregnant with our son, Arturo, waddling across the stage, getting my master's degree in tech, and haven't looked back since.
Wow. A lot of changes happened to you around then. And some influenced by personal things, the person who was the most important person in your life at
Yeah,
that time and still in your life.
yeah.
And most important other than, and including kids. So tell me how you as a woman, a strong woman, made a decision that, okay, I'm going to be influenced perhaps by where this person's going and what they're doing to kind of not necessarily follow, but do something that will align with them.
Yeah.
And was that part of the motivation? And then did it turn out that you weren't really sure whether this was, the right step, but then once you took that dive, you were like, oh, this is perfect. And how did the two of you manage if you're both students getting your master's? Probably not a lot of money coming into that household, right?
Definitely not. We were absolutely two broke graduate students in the middle of soybeans and cornfields of Urbana-Champaign campus. I mean, what was to our benefit was the area itself was very cost effective. So our rent, the milk, the gas, all the things that we talk about even today, was very, very low. And that certainly helped. We had a little bit of savings, of course. We did have graduate assistantships, and I know higher education is on attack right now. But I will say that those paid graduate assistantships really, really helped. He was doing his PhD at the time. I was doing my master's. We were able to attain as a graduate students, some healthcare, which was very, very helpful at that time. And the hospital system itself was very good, so that was to our benefit, and it was very close to campus. So we uh we we didn't have to drive too far in the year, 2015 with our 2000 Ford Taurus, very old car. Um, but to me, I call it the beautiful struggle, right? And so being able to navigate all that as we were both first generation high school and college graduates, and then at that time, graduate students together, particularly of color, it was an extremely difficult time, but not impossible. And looking back, being able to share those war stories, if you will, and looking at, how we're doing now, I mean, it's definitely been quite the journey, and I wouldn't change a thing.
Wow. So pregnant, very pregnant with your first child as you waddle across the stage to get your diploma, excited to probably embark on this new career, but with, a whole new personal element happening in life. And you never really know how parenthood is going to be until you're in it. So
Sure.
tell me about that first year. What were your plans when the baby came along and what ended up being the reality?
Yeah, for sure. So around that time, we unfortunately did not have any family members that could help. We had a handful of close friends that could support at times, such as coming over. My husband was probably home working on some papers, but I had to go to work or I had to go grocery shopping, or whatever the case may be. Um, but the real blessing happened when prior to giving birth, I had just a simple chat with a fellow graduate student, and she's from the Urbana-Champaign area, and she had asked me, she's like, "Oh, are you thinking about daycare, right? Are you thinking about childcare, right?" And I was like, "Absolutely. Do you know of any daycare centers?" And as you know, daycare centers are extremely expensive, no matter where you are in the U.S. Um, and so she suggested a good friend of hers who was a retired executive assistant from the university who had an in-home daycare. And she was, you know, wise beyond her years. I don't want to say old, but, she was retired, and her energy, we ended up meeting with her. Her energy was really great. And long story cut short, we were able to get on a waiting list while we were pregnant, so that as soon as I gave birth, um, uh, I did take some time off. I took, from 3 months off postpartum to take care of myself and, our family and our son. She was ready for us. And so through that relationship, we call her Granny. She, quite frankly, was an extension of our family. We absolutely wouldn't have been able to survive without her during those first 2 years. So she took care of our son from 12 weeks old until 2 years old. That we ended up having to move from Urbana-Champaign to Chicago because my husband was finally ABD, all but dissertation. During that time. And so, really grateful for that level of support. And quite frankly, wouldn't have been able to do anything that I did at that time, um, even looking for jobs, right? And, continuing my graduate assistantship. And I had a small contract on campus as well that helped financially, but grateful for that kind of support and strong advocate for childcare workers.
So tell me what having that daycare allowed you to do. You mentioned that you were continuing your studies. You had graduated. So after you graduated for those
Yeah.
couple of years before you came to Chicago,
Yeah.
what opportunities were you able to pursue? What jobs were you working? Were you able to see your pay increase dramatically? Were you able to get positions that you think helped you to springboard into other things in the future? Tell me what that laid the groundwork for versus, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I just need to stay home for a couple of years. Like, tell me what that allowed you to do and what you think the other option would have been if you didn't have that.
Yeah, for sure. So unfortunately, I did not have the option to just be a stay-at-home mom financially. So I absolutely had to work at that time. What was a blessing was that my graduate assistantship ended up becoming a contract postpartum. And so I was able to have that for about a year after giving birth. And that helped out tremendously. And then I had another contract at a national nonprofit at the time that was virtual, and, I just needed to travel at times to the Northeast, and that helped us out. The other blessing was because my husband continued his graduate assistantship, we were able to keep our family afloat and keep costs low. And the quality of life was great at Urbana-Champaign. Everything's about 8 to 10 minutes away. Very different than, how large Chicago is and how many people live in Chicago. And you can't compare because there's 3 million people in Chicago. There's maybe 120,000 people that live in Urbana-Champaign. The lifestyle very, very different. Um, but we were able to, keep our family afloat and get some support from Granny. And because I had flexibility in my schedule at the time, and so did my husband, if, our son needed anything, if we needed to pick him up, drop him off, take him to doctor's appointments, etc., uh, we not only had the flexibility to do it, but the distance wasn't too bad as well. So that was an absolute blessing.
So you were prepared and had a plan that you're going to find a way to have somebody watch him so you can continue to pursue making money and your career.
Yeah.
But even though that was part of the plan, did you experience mom guilt? Did you have family members saying, "What? You're not going to be with your baby?" Did you even have your husband not question it, but wonder, well, are there other options? Did you, even if you knew
Mhm.
there were no other options,
Yeah.
you feel that guilt that so many moms say, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah. So absolutely felt mom guilt. And it was, I mean, it's an ebb and flow, right? So there were some moments where, I needed the breather, especially since I was the breastfeeding mom at the time and I was a pumping mom at the time. Um, and my employer, was very, very flexible. I had a mother's room that I could use on site, AKA my office. I can just put the blinds on and put some like paper on windows and things.
Better than the bathroom I had to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, really realized my privilege in that. Um, but it didn't last long because at the end of the day, I know I'm working hard to provide for our family, right? And as a dual career couple, it was like me and my husband and our little one against the world, right? And because I had flexibility in my schedule and, I had banker's hours, if you will, um, I could have an opportunity to go see my son during the middle of the day or during my lunch break. Because again, the commute was very, very short, 8 to 10 minutes away. So the lifestyle was absolutely much more different for us if we would have, let's say, had our son in those early years in Chicago or in Boston.
So, what would you advise to other women? And everyone's situation is different, obviously. But if a woman is struggling with this idea of, boy, I would love flexibility, but it means less pay, less of this, less prestige, whatever, especially in those early years, when you've got a baby, a toddler, do you think that made a difference as you mentor other women? Do you tell them to really take that into account? And how do you think even companies have responded in terms of that? Do you see that as more of a need and that women are thinking of that more? And is that something that you recommend?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sociologists call it the motherhood penalty. And so, being a practitioner, scholar, social engineer, I absolutely experienced that. So, for example, when I decided to get out of the workforce and disintegrate my company to go back to grad school, it took me over 10 years to make this that I made in my early 30s, right? And so I have absolutely experienced that, and so that is very, very real for me, the motherhood penalty. But every mom has to have a conversation with themselves as well as their partner to kind of figure out what are the, in business terms, ROI of taking a high paying job, not being so close to your child, um, but or taking a lower paying job and being closer to your child, right? There are companies out there that, for my experience, do provide that flexibility, do provide that work life integration, because there's no such thing as balance. Yeah, and we could talk about that in another episode. But work life integration that was absolutely helpful for my family and I at the time. Um, and companies should think about what that looks like for their respective parent employees, right? So not just for moms, but for parents in general, because at the end of the day, you want to keep your talent. So, what kind of talent retention strategies should be utilized if your talent happens to be a parent, right? And how important is that for workplace culture? Um, as you think about diversity within the workplace, not just racial, cultural, and ethnic diversity, but family diversity in the workplace.
Mhm. What are you seeing as someone who works with companies to build up their leadership pipeline in terms of small and medium businesses out there really being willing to invest in a potential ROI that will benefit them in terms of retention and keeping that talent, but maybe not necessarily seeing an immediate ROI? Are you seeing that there's a willingness for it, or do you think we have a long way to go? And what do we as women need to do to educate better to get these companies to understand the value?
Yeah, for sure. So the research is out there where absenteeism obviously costs a lot more and recruitment costs a lot more than employee retention. So I don't necessarily need to repeat that, but the data is there. And so I feel like if companies look at the data and they look and compare, what policies and practices, both written and unwritten, do they have in place to support individuals with family responsibilities outside the workplace? They fare better and faring better in regards to revenue, in regards to retention, in regards to employee satisfaction. And so the information is there. Someone wants a resource. The Society of Human Resource Management has some really, really great information in regards to that. So your local HR leaders should have access to that information, for example, but it's also very Googleable, like, or on Google Scholar, peer-reviewed information. So that is a lot of the conversation that I have both with individual human clients as well as individual organizational clients. Being able to look at what are their pain points, both for the company and the individual employee, and then where can they meet in the middle. Um, that should be helpful.
And what are some examples? I mean, I know them, but maybe some in our listening audience don't. What do you think are the most critical things that a company can offer that are going to make a difference for working parents that are considering whether to cut back, leave the workforce, even take that job to begin with?
Yeah. So we unfortunately don't have enough time because it's so much. And what's so interesting with that
The
question,
overview. Like, what do you think? I mean, I always think flexibility, right? Flexible schedule, hybrid schedule, some sort of childcare benefit, even if they're not paying for childcare, but access to a platform, um, any kind of
there's resources out there that
Google meeting.
yeah, that's right. There's resources out there that companies can absolutely tap into. And I immediately thought of course, interestingly enough, your organization, your company, MomSub, can that you can partner with, right? So, to your point, companies should always look into work from home policies and what that looks like, how that fits on an individual basis, because this should not be a one size fits all. And even though a lot of companies are kind of leaning towards that, it's actually very damaging not only to the employee in regards to their workload, but to the institution of family, right? Because you're putting a phenomenal burden on individual with family responsibilities, both human babies and fur babies, right? I want to include that as well. Or elder responsibilities. Some of us have elder responsibilities outside of the workplace. Um, and so that should be taken into consideration. Of course, looking at policies and practices around, healthcare. What does that look like around non-monetary benefits? As mentioned, I mean, there's an organization called Moms First that delves into this more on a national level and on a policy level. And to your question, how can individuals participate? Well, definitely take a look at what does your parental leave look like in your state? What does it look like within the company that you work for? Because there are different rules for companies that have less than 50 employees, and there are for companies that have more than 50 employees, even 10 employees. There's different regulations and policies that are put into place that companies can adopt. And so there's a lot to talk about in that, but I think if the parent is able to really do that research, ask the hard questions, particularly to the HR leaders, um, I think we might be onto something.
Wonderful. And I want to hear more about your journey as you then came to the big city. I'm in the Chicago area. You moved from downstate, we call it, Champaign, you said among the cornfields, up to Chicago, very different, with a child. So you, your husband, and a child, embarking on a new adventure. What was the impetus to make that switch? And what did you expect? And then how did the reality mesh with that? And how did you deal with all of the personal and career obligations that you had? What happened for you personally as you made that change?
Yeah, for sure. So, as soon as my husband informed me that, he was ABD, all about dissertation within his PhD program, he is from Chicago, so I do have a brother-in-law and his family and my mother-in-law in Chicago. And so that was around 2018. And I started interviewing. So to your prior question, what kind of support did Granny provide? At that time, gosh, she was able to watch my son, and then I was able to go on in person as well as virtual interviews in Chicago at that time. So then by the time we did move out here in summer of 2018, by fall of 2018, I was able to get hired at a higher education institution in career services, career development after having, several years of career coaching under my belt and a freshly minted master's degree. And so that was 2018, kept working, and we actually found some childcare that was very cost effective through the Puerto Rican Cultural Daycare Center in Chicago. So that was really, really helpful for us as a young family, again, starting out our careers and our family at the same time. And 2019 happened. And then, of course, March 2020 happened. And so the silver lining of the pandemic was that my husband and I, we were able to work from home for 2 years, right? And we were able to keep our family together, spent very little in gas at the time, living in the city of Chicago. And so silver lining, that was quite frankly very, very helpful for us, both professionally and financially at the time. And we were very, very lucky. We did not get laid off. We were able to afford our rent at the time, which is double, 50% more than what it was in Urbana Champaign.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, so we were able to make ends meet, if you will. So then by the time we moved from the north side of Chicago, uh, from 2018 to 2021, and we were able to buy our first home in the south side of Chicago, we were able to do that and not not have too much of a headache, even though there's always a headache when you're a first time home buyer.
Yes. And so at the time during the pandemic, everyone obviously had their children at home, but then many people were able to transition their children back to school. Your child was still not in um, grammar school, in elementary school at that time, based on, right?
No, so we were able to
Preschool?
get him into
Preschool?
the like junior kindergarten, pre-kindergarten at that time. We're both trained educators, so education, particularly early education, is very, very important to us. So our little one had been in school since he was like 3 years old. So he was unfortunately a pandemic learner and had to start his digital literacy at that time when he was 3, 4.
So you were doing what everyone was doing, which was managing your career responsibilities and helping him with his learning at home. And then once things started opening up again, he transitioned into education. So you weren't just still watching him at home for those couple of years while you were working from home, because that's pretty difficult to do, to be working and giving work your all when your child is there,
Oh
especially
no,
if they're younger. It's almost impossible. Yeah.
we did the almost impossible. And so my husband was writing his dissertation at the time. And so he took over the dining room while we took over um, my home office, in our home. And we had a tablet for our little one, and we had my laptop from work. And so I ended up having to, and unfortunately, during that time, I was an assistant director of a career services department. So I had some ownership of my schedule. So when our little one had class, I was able to be with our little one while he was in virtual classroom and then going to meetings before or after his class. It was a level of insanity during that time and a level of tag teaming that I don't think I've ever experienced since then with my husband.
Put stress on you as a mother, your relationship, with your spouse, the whole family dynamic. I know when I went through a lot of stress, I found myself, yelling at my kids, which you don't want to do. And now they're older and they remember that you yelled all the time. No, not all the time, just for those few years when things were really tough, but they sometimes zero in on that, and remember that. And, and so I wonder, fast forward now, today, we're getting ready to talk, and you had to hold a bit because you're on the phone with the principal. And I said, no worries, no apologies needed. I totally understand. But your son's in school. How old is he? How are you still navigating, work and being a mom? And as kids get older, things sometimes get even more complicated. They can dress themselves and feed themselves, but they have all these activities to get to. And you want to provide that enrichment. And so how are you navigating that? What is your job like now? How much flexibility do you still have? And is that still important to you as you're looking at positions and moving up and over, having that flexibility?
Yeah, for sure. So our little one is now 8 years old and he's in the third grade. He's at a selective enrollment Chicago Public School, um, bilingual STEAM Academy. And so we're very, very proud of him. He's doing absolutely great. Uh, and he is what we call a math elite. So he is currently just loves math tremendously, but he's a track and field junior Olympian.
Wow.
So he's excelling both in the classroom and outside the classroom. And the insanity continues in regards to, my husband, he now graduated with his PhD in 2021 and has been working his permanent full-time job in big tech since then. And flexibility is still the name of the game. The fact that he was able to manage his schedule at the organization or the company that my husband works at, and up until this past spring, I also had a very flexible schedule. So I was able to, do the drop offs while my husband does the pickups. My husband is also coach dad. So he is able to be the chaperone in the afternoons. And then as a family, we're a sports family now. So the weekends and I feel like I've seen some really hysterical memes and videos on Instagram in regards to sports family life.
Oh, yeah, we did that. We had teams in baseball, soccer, basketball, just about every sport. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you think that your career and your career aspirations had any influence whatsoever on your decision to keep your family at yourself, your husband, and one child?
Yeah. So it's more about the support system. So because we don't have extended family members or close friends that can watch our doodle, pick him up, drop him off, um, even babysit, right? I mean, we do have my brother-in-law that lives here in the north side of Chicago, but they have their responsibilities. So we delegate for babysitting to them sparingly. Um, it's a lot. And so it would be quite impossible for us to continue to be a dual career couple while having our little one if we were to have another little one, without that, quite frankly, extended family support to uh, co-raise our child. And as you and I both know, it takes a village. And that adage is extremely true.
Mhm. And that's why we all want to try to help each other as much as we can. But we have to make those decisions for ourselves of what's working for us. And what are you doing now? Is there anything that you want to share with our listeners about ways that they can contribute to the social impact causes that are important to you and are part of the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm excited to share that I have reignited my tech entrepreneurial spirit. And now I am the founder and CEO of the Pagame Project, Pagame. And Pagame is literal Spanish translation to pay me. And the Pagame Project is an artificial intelligence and human intelligence hybrid career coaching platform that seeks to close the women's wage gap uh, globally. And so this is an area that I have not only very intimate experience in, but I'm very, very passionate about. And we do our work through our generative AI career coach agent named Rita AI, which is RITA, Rita AI. And she's named after my mom, Rita Valentin Correa. And my mom was a lovely, hardworking baddie. She was from Puerto Rico, born in Puerto Rico, but raised in the Bronx, New York City. And she was always really helpful with others. She was a human library and resource broker and really just loved helping people. But as an essential healthcare worker for over 30 years in the Boston, Massachusetts medical district, she was unfortunately severely underpaid and overworked. And so I did see that growing up. And unfortunately, she did become an ancestor in November of 22. Amongst everything that I shared with you, I had to deal with the passing of my mom, my son's grandmother, due to ovarian cancer. And so for me, I'm reclaiming my grief journey by now developing Padame Project in her honor.
Wow. And what a huge endeavor that is. But, we women, we take on hard things, right? Solving the childcare crisis, closing the wage gap. It's just another day for a superwoman. But I applaud you for that vision, and it's so needed. It still exists, and the young women of today know that as well, and hopefully the young men too. I have one of each myself.
That's right.
And I thank you so much for sharing your story, Lynette. Very inspiring. And if you found this conversation helpful or just refreshing for shining a light on some of the messy parts of life, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, you can reach out to me about the Mom Sub crowdfunding campaign at Diane@momsub.com, or connect with MomSub on any of our social media pages. That's MomSub, like a substitute mom. And Lynette said right at the beginning, I wish I could clone myself. So
Yeah.
we all feel that way sometimes. We all would love a substitute mom. And remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. Keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love to other women who need it.